God Valley is remembered as the day Rocks D. Zebek fell. Roger and Garp, back to back, standing over the ruins of an island erased from history. The future Pirate King and the future hero of the Marines, sharing a bloody victory that saved the celestial dragons and stabilized the world. But what if that image is wrong? What if God Valley wasn't Roger's greatest victory, but his biggest defeat? What if the moment that created the hero of the Marines never happened at all? Imagine that same battlefield, but this time, Roger is on his knees, Garp is broken, and the sky is filled with the laughter of monsters. Rocks doesn't disappear into the shadows of history. Rocks wins. In this timeline, Rocks D. Zebek doesn't just survive God Valley, he dominates it. His crew, already a force to be reckoned with, tears through the so-called alliance of Marines and pirates. Whitebeard's quake power shatters Marine lines. Big Mom rampages through celestial dragon guards. Kaido, I'm still young but already a beast, dives into the fight again and again, refusing to fall. After that, the celestial dragons die screaming, their slaves freed in chaos, and the world government's proud secret island had become an absolute mess of blood and broken symbols. Rocks walks away from God Valley, not as a forgotten name, but as the undisputed terror of the seas. No capture, no mysterious disappearance. His core crew remains intact. Whitebeard at his side, Big Mom and Kaido unleashed, Nanshiki plotting under his banner. The news spreads, even if the government tries to bury it. The strongest crew in history just crushed the alliance that was supposed to stop them. How would the balance of power survive that? This single reversal tears through everything familiar. No Pirate King Roger means no romantic Great Pirate era, no legendary execution in Logetown, no inherited will that sends countless pirates chasing a dream. Without that symbol, on the seas don't bloom with hopeful pirates, they choke under fear. The Yonko system never forms as a balance of power. Instead, Rocks stands at the top, and the rest of the world scrambles just to endure. The world government, already shaken, is forced into the shadows, hiding behind whatever admirals and secret weapons remain. The Marines lose their shining hero title for Garp, and their image of absolute justice cracks. The Shichibukai system might be born earlier out of desperation. Ni or never at all, if no pirate wants to serve a broken regime. Marineford isn't the proud fortress seen in canon. It either becomes a terrified bunker or the first target in a much bigger war. Soon enough, familiar faces twist under this new history. Whitebeard never becomes the warm father protecting a chosen family. Big Mom and Kaido don't splinter off as rival emperors. They remain loyal monsters under Rocks, honing their Haki and Devil Fruit powers for a captain who actually won. And the Marineford War that once revolved around Ace might never happen, or if it does, it becomes something far worse, with Rock's shadow looming over every decision. From here, everything changes. The seas, the legends, even Luffy's entire generation grows up under the terror of Rocks instead of the legend of Roger. Next, step by step, this timeline will be rewritten. From the ashes of God Valley to the shape of the Grand Line, and to how the Straw Hats era begins in a world ruled by a living nightmare. Canon God Valley, the victory that built Roger's world. Before this timeline is shattered, the canon version of God Valley has to be rebuilt piece by piece. God Valley was a ghost before it even died, a mysterious island erased from maps, known only to the highest levels of the world government, where celestial dragons gathered for their sick hunting games and brought slaves as living targets. On the surface, it was a secret paradise for the so-called gods. In reality, it was a powder keg waiting for a spark. That spark was Rocks D. Zebek. His crew was already a force to be reckoned with. Whitebeard, Big Mom, Kaido, Shiki, and other monsters all sailing under one flag, all chasing their captain's dream of ruling the world. When Rocks moved on God Valley, it wasn't a raid. It was an execution order on the celestial dragons themselves. If that attack succeeded, as the entire world order would have become an absolute mess overnight. But the world government wasn't saved by its admirals, it was saved by pirates and a single marine. Goldie Roger's crew arrived, and alongside them stood Monkey D. Garp, a man who hated the celestial dragons but refused to let the world fall into total chaos. Enemies became allies for one day. Roger's blade, Garp's fists, and the Marines' last line of defense clashed with the most terrifying pirate crew in history. As the fight at God Valley was so brutal that even in canon, details are buried. Only the outcome is clear. Rox was defeated, his ambition shattered, and his crew scattered across the sea. That victory meant that the celestial dragons survived. The world government kept its throne, and Garp earned the title Hero of the Marines for saving those he despised. After that, his legend inside Marineford exploded, even as the truth of what he'd protected stayed twisted. For Roger, the God Valley was the final door opening. With Rox gone, the last great obstacle on the seas disappeared. The Marines focused on stabilizing the world, and the world government focused on burying the incident. That silence gave Roger room to move. He sailed deeper into the Grand Line, reached Laugh-Tale, uncovered the secrets of the Void Century, and soon enough became Pirate King, the man whose execution would ignite Luffy's entire generation. Meanwhile, as the fragments of Rock's crew reshaped the new world, Whitebeard claimed his own territory and family. Big Mom built Tato Land. Kaido forged Wano into a fortress. Shiki lurked in the shadows. Their rise as separate emperors created the Yonko structure, a four-way deadlock that defined the age Luffy and the Straw Hats inherited. The world government's reaction said everything about how fragile its power really was. Instead of celebrating, it erased God Valley's existence, suppressed Rock's name, and treated the incident like a near-apocalyptic war that had to be forgotten. On paper, order had been restored. In reality, one desperate victory was holding up the illusion of control. And that is the pillar this what-if is about to kick out. Because if God Valley ends differently, if Rox doesn't fall that day, how would the Marines, the Yonko, even Marineford itself look when Luffy's era finally arrives? From God Valley to Marineford, how one win shaped an era in canon. That desperate victory at God Valley becomes the starting gun for an entire era. With Rox gone, the seas finally exhale. The greatest monster is dead. Or so the story goes. That absence opens a path for one man. Goldie Roger. Without a rampaging Rox crew tearing at the world government, Roger can sail without being overshadowed by a constant, chaotic war. His duels with Whitebeard define the age. His alliance with Odin unlocks the secrets of the poneglyphs. And soon enough, when his crew reaches the final island, Laugh-Tale. There, Roger discovers the One Piece, learns the true history, and realizes his time is running out. His illness means that the Pirate King's reign is incredibly brief. But his execution in Logetown is anything but small. One last smile, one last taunt about his treasure. That single moment ignites the great pirate era, sending waves of dreamers across the seas, from Shanks holding that straw hat to a kid named Luffy in East Blue. And the legend of Roger becomes the fuel that pushes an entire generation toward Marineford. But this legend only shines so bright because the shadow of Rox is gone. With their captain erased, his former subordinates scatter and grow on their own terms. Whitebeard, free from Zebek's ambition, becomes the strongest man in the world and reshapes his power into protection. His ship turns into a family. Orphans, outcasts, and monsters find a father instead of a tyrant. As Big Mom channels her obsession with race and food into Tato Land, building a twisted utopia where every species can live together under her iron rule. Kaido, abandoned and bitter, forges Wano into a fortress, a closed-off weapons factory, and future battleground. Instead of serving a single overlord, each of these monsters becomes a separate pillar, a force to be reckoned with in a fragile balance the world barely understands. and the world government responds like a cornered animal, pretending it is still in control. The age of Roger and these rising emperors leads to a new structure. The Yonko on one side, the Marines and Shichibukai on the other. The Shichibukai system is born to weaponize pirates against pirates, turning figures like Mihawk, Crocodile, and Hancock into licensed predators. Marineford is fortified into the White Fortress of Justice, the stage where law will supposedly never lose. Above them, then the Celestial Dragons return to their cruel lifestyle: slaves, auctions, sobriety abuses. In their minds, the worst threat, Rox D. Zebek, was erased at God Valley. History had become an absolute mess, so they simply buried it. All of this funnels straight into Marineford. Whitebeard's status as an independent Yonko makes Ace's capture the perfect strategic move. Execute the son of the Pirate King under the nose of the world's strongest man, and prove that even legends kneel. By Ace, the war at Marineford is designed as a controlled spectacle, a public stage where the government can show that its power, its admirals, its hockey monsters still rule the seas. But what if that control is an illusion? How would the balance look if the pillar holding it up was a lie? Because this entire system, Roger's legend, independent Yonko, the Shichibukai, Marineford's role as the final wall, rests on one assumption: Rox died at God Valley. The next step is simple: remove that assumption. Imagine Marineford when the ghost of that forgotten captain is not a ghost at all. Breaking the chain, the exact moment the timeline diverges. So roll the tape back to God Valley, to the moment history insists was Rox's grave. The Celestial Dragons had gathered for their twisted hunt, slaves dragged in chains, and a secret island already drowning in arrogance. In canon, this is where Garp and Roger cornered the most dangerous pirate crew in existence. But what if Rox knew they were coming? In this timeline, the ambush is reversed. Cypherpol agents vanish days before the event, their reports never reaching Marineford. Rox D. Zebek has already torn the information out of them with haki and fear, then fed their bodies to the beasts of the island. That one change meant that when the Marine fleet and Roger's ship breach the fog, they sail into a prepared kill box, not a desperate last stand. And the sky splits as Big Mom hurls entire mountain slabs like cannonballs. Kaido, still young but already a force to be reckoned with, dives from the clouds in dragon form, crashing into warships before they can even deploy. Shiki locks the fleet in midair, freezing escape routes, while Whitebeard's quake punches turn the coastline into a blender. The pristine hunting grounds had become an absolute mess in minutes. Garp tries to push through, his fists shatter hulls, and his presence rallies panicked Marines. But every advance is met by a wall of monsters who are not breaking, not arguing, just executing Rox's plan. Roger reaches the island, blades clashing with the Zebek amid collapsing terrain. Their fight tears through slave quarters and noble pavilions alike, a brutal reminder that this war doesn't care who thinks they are gods. Then the crucial flip. Garp never gets his decisive opening. A combined strike from Whitebeard and Kaido fractures the ground under him, hurling him into the sea of wreckage. Roger takes a quake shockwave to the chest, organs screaming, and is forced back by Big Mom's relentless assault. He realizes that staying means dying here, pointlessly. Retreat becomes the only option. Celestial Dragons die screaming on their own private island, crushed under rubble, incinerated by stray attacks, or simply executed when Rox's men breach their bunkers. And the world government cannot protect them. Worse, it cannot fully hide that failure. Survivors talk. Fragments of the truth leak out. And this time, Rox's crew does not scatter. The weak links and opportunists are the ones who fall. Those who walk away are the core: Whitebeard, Big Mom, Kaido, Shiki, and a tight circle of killers who have seen their captain outplay the world government and Roger at once. Fear, respect, and sheer opportunity weld them together. Rox doesn't vanish into rumor. He becomes the living nightmare of the seas, the man who slaughtered celestial dragons and survived the full weight of marine intervention. From that day, the government shifts into a defensive, reactive posture, building fortresses, drafting new systems, always asking the same question in every meeting. What if Rox moves next? So how would the next decade unfold when the greatest threat is not a legend from 40 years ago, but an active overlord? Roger is wounded and diminished. At Marineford's prestige is cracked, and even the so-called gods are no longer untouchable. Age of Xebec, a world ruled by a living monster. The answer came fast. Rox did not fade into rumor. He marched straight out of God Valley with living legends at his back, and the age that followed was not an age of dreams. It was the age of Xebec. After that battle, the seas had become an absolute mess. And islands that once flew the world government's flag suddenly woke up under a different banner, a jagged black Jolly Roger with a twisted grin. Former government depots were emptied in days. Treasure vaults, weapon stores, even research labs were stripped as Rock's crew moved like a storm front, taking everything that wasn't nailed down and killing most of what was. But what if the most terrifying part wasn't the raids themselves, but the targets? Rox didn't chase merchant lanes. He hunted the celestial dragons. Their secret routes, holy convoys, and slave transports turned into open-season trophies. Ships that once sailed with absolute protection were dragged beneath the waves, their golden figureheads nailed to harbor walls as warnings. Every time a bubble of a noble popped in the sky, Mariéjois shook. How would the world government respond to a monster that didn't respect even their gods? Survival meant retreat. The influence was pulled back from the most dangerous seas. Whole blues were quietly written off as unstable. Marineford remained a fortress, but its reach shrank, its fleets hugging safer corridors instead of patrolling the new world like before. Soon enough, even the Holy Land changed. Either Mariéjois was buried in new layers of steel and sea stone, or the true leadership slipped deeper underground, into hidden strongholds built with one purpose: outlast Xebec. Massive resources that might have gone into public order were diverted into secret weapons projects decades early. Prototype pacifista shells, incomplete seraphim concepts, and ancient weapon research all accelerated in the shadows. Every failed experiment, another reminder that Rox was still out there. In this world, the Yonko era never really forms. There are no four equal emperors balancing each other. There is one overlord and three monsters on chains. Whitebeard, Big Mom, Da and Kaido become sanctioned warlords of chaos, each ruling vast territories in Rox's name. Whole seas pay tribute to the main ship. Whole populations live and die based on whether an overlord is in a good mood that year. Whitebeard's domain is the merciful one, protected by his personal code, but even he cannot openly defy Rox. Big Mom's islands are sugar-coated prisons, feeding both her hunger and Xebec's tribute demands. Kaido turns his region into a permanent war zone, a training ground where only the strongest survive long enough to become part of Rox's next elite strike force. Piracy under this shadow changes completely. There are fewer dreamers chasing a treasure at the end of the world, more brutal survivalists clinging to scraps between empires. The idea of sailing like Roger, chasing freedom and inherited will, becomes almost laughable. The new generation learns that a pirate is not an adventurer. A pirate is either a cog in Rox's machine or a target. And then a pattern breaks. Far away in a quiet East Blue village, parents tell children not about a pirate king and his last great treasure, but about the living monster who rules the seas. Campfire horror stories whisper the name Rox, the way another timeline whispered Roger. A rubber boy with a straw hat listens, not dreaming of Marineford or a throne, but of breaking a nightmare. The camera pulls back again. The age of Xebec tightens its grip, and the government sharpens its hidden blades, and the world holds its breath, waiting for the first real crack in the monster's reign. Fate of monsters. Whitebeard, Big Mom, and Kaido under Rox's shadow. Under that crushing age of Xebec, The legends that once stood as separate emperors are trapped in a single, suffocating shadow. The world calls them monsters. But what if the real tragedy is that each one had a different dream, slowly strangled by the same captain? For Whitebeard, God Valley was supposed to be the last time he fought for someone else's ambition. In the original history, that battle and the chaos after meant that he could slip away, gather misfits, and build the only thing he ever wanted, a family. Here, Rox does not fall, which means the strongest man on the seas never gets to walk away. His haki, his quake power, his very name become the banner of Xebec's conquests. Instead of a free Yonko, he is the right hand of a tyrant. By the by, strongest spear that smashes Marineford's predecessors, tears through government islands, and personally escorts Rox whenever celestial dragons need to be hunted. Every rescued orphan, every broken drifter who would have joined the Whitebeard pirates is now dragged into Rox's empire as a division under Newgate's command. He still calls them sons, still drinks with them, still protects them with terrifying power. But the flag above their heads is not his. It is Xebec's jagged grin, as Big Mom takes a different path into the nightmare. In canon, losing Rox meant being forced to claw Totoland out of the New World, turning her obsession with races and children into a warped attempt at utopia. Here, she never needs to build a nation alone. Rox already has an empire. Linlin becomes its breeder and broker. Her island chains are not a sanctuary, but a factory. Marriages are arranged not just for her own crew, but as binding contracts for Rox's war machine. Soon enough, as her dream of a diverse, happy table had become an absolute mess, children are raised with hockey drills instead of tea parties. Rare races are cataloged like weapons. Her devil fruit, her soul tricks, her endless childbirth turn into a strategic resource. She is a force to be reckoned with, but always under another name. Her ego chafing every time Xebec claims credit for a victory her offspring win. Then there is Kaido. In the original timeline, years of capture, torture, and failed executions forged him into a beast obsessed with war and suicide. Under a victorious Rox, that process accelerates. Xebec looks at the rookie with the unbreakable body and sees a living siege engine. Kaido is thrown into the worst fights first, dropped onto fortified islands alone just to see what breaks. After that, his addiction to chaos deepens fast. How would the weaponization of his mind progress under a captain like Rox? And experiments that Vegapunk whispers about in another world are pushed into the open. Kaido starts stockpiling failed Zoan experiments, testing artificial devil fruit formulas on prisoners and even willing subordinates. If the government can build Pacifista in secret, Rox can answer with his own monsters. Inside this empire, tension builds like pressure under a tectonic plate. Whitebeard wants a family, but every victory chains his children tighter to Xebec. Big Mom wants to be the matriarch of all seas, yet she keeps being treated as a womb with haki. Kaido wants endless battle, but Rox is not a mindless berserker anymore. He is strategic, patient, willing to pull his beast back when a fight does not serve the larger war. Their clashes start small. Disobeyed orders, accidental late arrivals, a few too many drinks, and a shattered banquet hall. But what if these are not just ego fights? What if they are the first cracks in the strongest crew in history? In a world where Luffy and the Straw Hats grow up hearing only about Xebec's terror, the real question is simple. If Roger cannot topple this monster, will Whitebeard, Big Mom, or Kaido be the one to light the fuse from within? Roger without a crown, a pirate king who never was. Those cracks inside the Rox crew spread fast, but the man who felt them most wasn't Whitebeard, Big Mom, or Kaido. It was the one pirate who was supposed to surpass them all, Gol D. Roger. In this timeline, God Valley is not Roger's hidden triumph. It is his public failure. The island still disappears from maps. The celestial dragons still vanish in a storm of blood and secrets. But the whispers are different. they say Roger and Garp stood together against a monster and still lost. That the so-called future Pirate King was left broken on a nameless shore, coughing blood, Heike shattered, crew scattered. Yet the hero of the Marines title never comes, and instead, both men are quietly blamed for not stopping Rox when it mattered. For Roger, the sea after that had become an absolute mess. The world government brands him an unstable D who provoked Rox. The Marines hunt him as a scapegoat. At the same time, Rox D. Xebec marks him as a rival that almost ruined everything. Two colossal forces, enemies on paper, now share one target. Roger sails under a constant double shadow, forced to dodge Buster calls in one direction and Rox assassins in the other. This means the dream that once led to Laugh-Tale is pushed into the background. In canon, Roger could roam, challenge legends, and chase road poneglyphs because the seas were chaotic but balanced. Here, Rox is not just a Yonko. He is a force to be reckoned with that dominates key routes, ancient islands, and even stretches of the Calm Belt. His crew controls gateways to the New World the way the Marines once controlled Marineford. Every path toward the final island runs through Zizabek's territory. So Roger adapts. Grand open exploration turns into guerrilla piracy. Quick raids instead of legendary duels, silent dives into hidden ruins, then desperate retreats as Rock's flag appears on the horizon. He still meets Odin. He still brushes against the truth of the Void Century. But what if every revelation comes with another scar and another crewmate buried at sea? Reaching Laugh-Tale becomes less a victory lap and more a stolen moment. Maybe Roger glimpses the One Piece. Maybe he even laughs at the world's true history. But without time, without health, without the stage of a Marineford-style execution, his discovery never becomes a beacon. There is no final announcement to the world, no invitation to a great pirate era, as the treasure turns into a rumor that both Rox and the government want erased, a dangerous secret rather than a dream. How would the legend change then? Instead of the man who found everything, Roger becomes a ghost story, a tragic D who almost changed the world, then vanished under Rock's overwhelming shadow. His name is spoken in low voices in back alley bars as a warning. Even the man who challenged Xebec could not win. And that sets the stage for the next generation. Because soon enough, children like Luffy, Ace, and Sabo are not growing up on tales of Roger the Pirate King. They are growing up in a world ruled by Rox the Overlord. In a world where the symbol of piracy is not freedom, but fear. What happens to their dreams of justice, rebellion, and power? Children of a different legend, Luffy, Ace, and Sabo in the age of Xebec. In this twisted age, bedtime stories hit very differently. Our children are not hearing about a smiling pirate king who found the One Piece. They are hearing about Rox D. Xebec, the man who broke God Valley, shattered the celestial dragon's untouchable myth, and turned the seas into an age of monsters. But what if the three brothers at Mount Kalubo grew up under that shadow instead? For Ace, everything changes. In canon, being the son of the Pirate King meant living in the shadow of the greatest legend. Here, Goldie Roger is not a legend. He is the man who challenged Xebec and lost. A failure the world government barely bothers to erase because his defeat already buried his name. That means Ace is not the secret heir to glory. He is the hidden son of a loser in a world where Rox stands as a force to be reckoned with. That twist makes his hatred of his bloodline even more vicious. Being Roger's son now means inheriting disgrace, not greatness. Every whispered rumor about God Valley, and every half-told tale about the idiot who stood against Xebec cuts deeper. Proving himself does not mean surpassing a pirate king. It means clawing his way out of a pit of shame, desperate to show that his blood is not weak. How would the fire inside Ace burn when the entire era screams that Roger's will is meaningless? Garp, in this world, wears that same failure on his shoulders. The hero of God Valley never existed. Instead, a Garp is the Marine who stood with Roger and still could not stop rocks. His name is tarnished, his medals feel hollow, and that guilt warps how he treats Luffy. Instead of a gruff grandfather who secretly nurtures a pirate dream, he becomes obsessive, overprotective, determined that Luffy never touches a ship, a flag, or a devil fruit. After that, even Shank's influence is thrown into question. If he sailed under Roger, then his captain's defeat at God Valley brands him as a relic of a dead dream, a wandering remnant of a failed era. If Rocks dominated too quickly, maybe Shanks never even meets Roger, instead surviving as a small-time captain trying not to be crushed between the Marines and Xebeck's empire. Either way, the red-haired man who once sparked Luffy's dream has to adapt to a sea where the Rocks flag defines piracy. Meanwhile, Sabo's world tightens like a noose. The world government, terrified after Xebeck's victory, clings even harder to its remaining loyal kingdoms. Goa becomes an extreme version of itself, the nobles richer, crueler, more paranoid, the Grey Terminal burning even hotter under forced purges. The Celestial Dragons may be weakened, but their class still exists, lashing out at the lowest humans to prove that their authority has not cracked. That pressure pushes Sabo further. His hatred is no longer just for snobbish nobles. It stretches toward the entire system that let Rocks rampage and still props up monsters at the top. The Revolutionary Army in this timeline is fighting a two-front war against a desperate world government and against pirate tyrants who took advantage of the chaos. In this environment, the brothers' shared dream shifts. Around that campfire, they do not talk about becoming Pirate King in Roger's image. They talk about breaking the age of monsters. Ace, drowning in insecurity, might feel an almost magnetic pull toward Rocka's empire, toward the brutal, undeniable power that silenced Roger's name. Luffy, by contrast, rejects both sides, clinging to pure freedom, refusing to bow to Marines, Rocks, or anyone else. Sabo's path bends toward organized rebellion, not just adventure. And then, a pattern breaks. Cut to a teenage Ace in some lawless port, rain tapping against warped wooden walls. He stands before a towering spread of wanted posters from the Rocks era. Xebeck's jagged grin, Whitebeard's towering frame, Big Mom's monstrous smile, Kaido's looming horns. Marineford, training, hockey, all those future battles are still far away. Right now, Ace's eyes move past Rocks, past Kaido, and lock on one face: Whitebeard. The camera lingers. In a world where Roger had become an absolute mess of a failed challenger, Ace is not searching for a king to surpass. He is searching for a father strong enough to rewrite what his blood means. A new war of ideals: Marines, Shichibukai, and a cornered world government. Ace's gaze locking onto Whitebeard does more than choose a captain. It chooses a side in a new kind of war. Because once Rocks walks away from God Valley alive, the entire institutional map of the world starts to twist. The Marines are no longer the calm blue wall that stopped Roger and chased scattered pirates. Under Rock's constant raids on celestial dragons and holy lands, the Marines evolve into something harsher, heavier, less idealistic. Justice stops being a symbol and becomes a survival doctrine. Garp, who in canon became the hero of the Marines, is different here. His failure at God Valley is whispered in every HQ corridor. The title hero is poisoned. New recruits still admire his raw power, but command treats him like a reminder of what happens when emotion gets in the way. After that disgrace, figures like Sengoku rise faster, not as patient strategists, but as crisis managers holding back a tidal wave. And Akainu? In a world where Rocks openly slaughters nobles, Sakazuki's absolute justice is no longer extreme. It is policy. How would the hierarchy react when a single pirate crew can topple a kingdom overnight? Promotion now means willingness to fire a buster call on rumor alone. Training focuses on mass destruction, not rescue. and admirals are chosen less for charisma and more for who can erase an island the fastest. The Marines had become an absolute mess of fear, power, and paperwork trying to keep up with a monster. But the government knows brute force is not enough. In the canon world, the Shichibukai system balances Yonko. Here, there are no 4 emperors. There is one storm, Rox D. Izabek. So the Shichibukai becomes something else entirely. A desperate firewall of mid-level warlords to pirates who hate the government but fear Rox more. Imagine Crocodile, Moria, even a younger Doflamingo being offered deals not to keep them in check, but to weaponize their territories as buffer zones. Hold this sea against Rox and his monsters, and the world government will look the other way. These pacts are fragile, dripping with betrayal. But what if the only thing worse than serving the celestial dragons is being noticed by Rox? Meanwhile, Dragon's path changes. In a world where Rox is actively attacking celestial dragons, burning their estates and humiliating their convoys, the Revolutionary Army faces a brutal question. Is the enemy the world government or the chaos that replaces it? Soon enough, Dragon's movement splits. Some commanders whisper that Rox is a necessary evil, a force to be reckoned with that can break the chains faster than any pamphlet or secret meeting. Others, closer to Dragon's core ideal, I'd see the truth. Replacing one tyrant with another is not freedom. It is repainting the cage. The world government responds with paranoia turned into policy. Censorship about God Valley fails because Rox is still out there, carving his name into the red line itself. So the narrative shifts. Official records, Denden Mushi broadcasts, and reverie speeches all push one story. Rox is the ultimate evil. Every scorched island becomes a justification. Buster calls, human experiments, see ancient secret weapons buried in forbidden labs. All of it is repackaged as necessary sacrifices to stop the devil who once walked into God Valley and refused to die. And in the middle of this 4-way tension, Rox, Marines, Shichibukai, revolutionaries, history bends toward a single question. If Marineford and Cannon gathered the world around Ace, what single prisoner, what single public execution in this timeline could drag all 4 powers onto one catastrophic battlefield at the same time? A son of Rox? A traitor admiral? Or someone even more dangerous, whose bloodline turns every faction into a loaded gun, waiting for the first shot? Marineford Reforged, when Rox brings the war to the gods. In this world, that question finally gets its answer when the cameras turn toward the Holy Land itself. The Age of Rox had dragged on for decades, and the balance between pirates and the world government had become an absolute mess. But what if the next Marineford wasn't at Marineford at all, but on the red earth beneath the celestial dragon's palaces? Years after God Valley, Rox D. Zebek is older, the edges of his madness sharpened rather than dulled. The failed erasure of that island, the survival of most celestial dragons, and the continued existence of Maria Schwa mean only one thing in his mind. The job was never finished. So when a new marine capital is raised like a steel wall around the Holy Land, a fortress even more fortified than Marineford, Rox sees it as an insult, a challenge, one last battlefield to decide if centralized power will live or die. The world government senses it too. Cypher Paul reports of islands disappearing overnight, of Kaido testing his dragon form against Buster Calls and winning, of Big Mom's fleets devouring entire supply lines. Rox's empire has become a force to be reckoned with, and the old strategies no longer work. And that pressure leads to a desperate move. Capture a symbol that can drag every monster into one place. So the noose falls on Ace. In this timeline, Ace grows up under Whitebeard's flag, but Whitebeard never leaves Rox's shadow. The old man is still the son Rox respects, the only one allowed to build a family fleet inside the larger empire. Ace, a D with Roger's blood and Whitebeard's mark, becomes the perfect target. His devil fruit, his charisma, his lineage, everything screams danger. When he is ambushed, overwhelmed by admirals wielding advanced Haki and pacifista lines, his capture is not just a tactical win, it is bait. The world watches as the broadcast announces it. The execution of Portgas D. Ace, foster son of Edward Newgate, blood son of Gul D. Roger, and prized heir within the Rocks Empire, to be held at the new holy stronghold on the Red Line. How would the pirates ignore that? How would the Revolutionary Army? Soon enough, the factions converge. On one side are Rocks himself, Whitebeard at his prime, Big Mom roaring in from Totoland, Kaido diving from the sky, and countless allied crews that grew up in an age ruled by fear, not dreams. Opposite them, the full Marine force, Sengoku commanding, Garp chained by duty, 3 admirals lined up beneath the execution platform, vice admirals and pacifista walls forming a human and steel shield around the celestial dragons. The Shichibukai stand in the middle, forced onto the front lines, and some secretly hoping Rocks wins, others praying for the status quo. In the shadows, the Revolutionary Army lurks, dragon waiting for both tyrannies to bleed each other dry before striking Mariajois itself. Unlike the tragic rescue at Cannon Marineford, this is not about one father and one son. This is a world-ending confrontation. If Rocks falls, the government survives. If he wins, the very idea of a world government might disappear. And as the first cannon fires, the question shifts again. When Rocks clashes with all 3 admirals at once, when Whitebeard unleashes his quake power without illness holding him back, when Kaido tears straight through pacifista lines like paper, can the world itself survive the fight that follows? The next section dives into that battlefield blow by blow, where every matchup looks impossible, and every punch threatens to reshape the seas forever. When monsters collide, cinematic war under Rocks' banner. The first blow doesn't land on a person. It lands on the world. The sky over Mariajois tears open as if the heavens themselves are afraid. Thunder splits around a curtain of magma, while below, the Holy Land's cliffs crack as Whitebeard drives his tremor quakes into the Red Line at full health. No wounds, no sickness, just the pure, unrestrained power of the man once called the strongest in the world. The sea far below boils, entire marine fleets heaving as tsunamis rise like walls. Mariajois had become an absolute mess in a single heartbeat. The golden halls of the celestial dragons shudder, chandeliers crashing as Rocks' commanders descend like meteors. Kaido, in full dragon form, coils around the sacred slopes, his roar shaking the air while his flames scorch pacifista squadrons before they even finish their targeting scans. On the central plaza, 3 colors of justice collide with one man, Kizaru's light, Akainu's magma, Aokiji's ice, all converging on Rocks D. A. Zebek. His Haki crashes out like a storm front. Black lightning veins the sky as his conqueror's will turns weaker, Marines into unconscious statues. A shadowy, swirling mass around his arms hints at a devil fruit no history book ever recorded, something that bites into even Logaya bodies and drags them into raw, crushing gravity. Kizaru's kick bends midair, light warped by invisible weight. Akainu's fist meets a palm that simply refuses to melt. Aokiji's ice field shatters as Rocks steps forward, every movement a declaration that this era belongs to him. How would the admirals handle a captain who treats 3-on-1 like a warm-up? Down on the shattered lower tiers, Whitebeard swings his Bicento into Akainu and Kizaru at once, trading blows without coughing blood, without hesitation. Each quake punch sends shockwaves through the marine stronghold, forcing Sengoku to transform into his Buddha form just to keep the entire plateau from collapsing into the sea. Kaido dives through fleets, dragon claws ripping battleships in half, pacifistas fire in formation, lasers crossing the sky, but his scales tank the beams as if they were rain. He crashes through a wall of them, metal bodies sent flying like broken toys. Behind them, Big Mom laughs, not as a frontline duelist, but as the architect of chaos. Souls pour from her hands into the battlefield itself. Cannons sprout manic grins and start firing on their former masters. Walls of living flame rear up, swallowing marine formations and reshaping the terrain into a burning maze. Her children and allied crews flood every gap, turning the fight into a multi-layered war zone where no direction is safe. The government answers with its own nightmares. Mass-deployed pacifistas march in from every gate. Prototype Seraphim rise from hidden hangars, Lunarian wings igniting as they blitz through pirate lines with Mihawk-like slashes and laser blasts. Buster Call-level bombardments rain from distant fleets, shells falling even on friendly positions, because at this point, precision has died. Then comes the true panic. Deep beneath Mariejwa, ancient mechanisms rumble. A forbidden, weaponized system, never meant to see the sun again, begins to wake. If it fires, it won't distinguish between rocks, marines, or celestial dragons. And it will simply erase the battlefield. For a heartbeat, the camera cuts tight. Garp stands before rocks again, fists clenched, eyes haunted by God Valley. Sengoku strains against a towering tsunami, golden palms pressed out as if holding back the end of the world. Shichibukai, like Mihawk and Doflamingo, pause mid-fight, calculating whether this is the moment to choose a side or carve their own throne from the chaos. Then, a pattern interrupts. Everything goes quiet. One blow lands. A single, a world-shaking strike from somewhere within the storm. The sound vanishes, the horizon bends, and for an instant, the screen goes white. When vision returns, the battlefield is not the same, and the next phase of this war will decide which monster's dream survives. If Rox wins again, or finally falls, rewriting the world's future. The silence breaks with a single truth. That blow did not end the war. It split the future. From here, the timeline branches. In one path, Odrox survives this second God Valley, still standing after clashing with legends old and new. In the other, that white-out flash was his final fall. But what if the world had to live with both possibilities hanging over it, like twin execution blades? In the survival branch, Rox drags himself out of the crater, bloodied but laughing, a force to be reckoned with that even an alliance of Marines, Emperors, and Revolutionaries cannot kill. That alone turns this battle into the anti-Marineford. At Marineford, Whitebeard's death meant that the balance shattered, but then reformed around New Yonko. Here, Rox's survival means there is no balance to begin with. No neat four-emperor grid, just one tyrant at the top and everyone else scrambling underneath. Whitebeard, Big Mom, Kaido, even Shiki are dragged back into his gravity. Their brief independence dies. The world government, already wounded from the first God Valley, now faces a monster that has beaten its greatest heroes twice. Garp's title as Hero of the Marines evaporates. Sengoku's legacy turns from strategist to failure. Marineford, as a symbol of justice, had become an absolute mess long before the Straw Hats ever arrive. Ace, under this Rox-dominated sky, becomes a living bargaining chip. Maybe Rox parades him as the son of the Pirate King who now kneels to a different D. Maybe Ace is executed in a twisted echo of Marineford, not as a prisoner of justice, but as a warning from chaos. Or, in the darkest version, Ace is broken and turned into a symbol of submission, his hockey and devil fruit power shackled to Rox's banner. In the second branch, that blinding strike truly kills Rox. Not through a glorious duel, but through a desperate coalition. Garp and Sengoku, Whitebeard turning his quake against his former captain, Big Mom and Kaido lunging in for their own future, and revolutionary saboteurs striking from the shadows. How would the world process a victory that required every monster on the board to swing at the same target? Compared to Marineford, this death doesn't create a power scramble among four Yonko. It detonates the entire top layer of the sea at once. Whitebeard, Big Mom, and Kaido all reach for the vacant throne in the same instant. Shichibukai are irrelevant. The Yonko system never stabilizes. Dragon finally steps into the light, using the chaos to expose the celestial dragons. And while Garp either finds redemption in ending Rox, or sinks into regret for failing to protect anything else. Luffy's generation enters a world with no clear Pirate King legacy. The map is shattered. Marineford is just one of 2 God Valley-scale scars, both carved by the same name. Luffy's training makes him stronger, but every island is a frontline, every sea a lingering graveyard of Rock's influence. Soon enough, a final question hangs over everything, even if Rox falls here. And does the world heal? Or did this war simply pass his crown of terror to the next generation of monsters waiting in the dark? Rock's Shadow and Roger's Echo. What this timeline says about One Piece. Soon enough, that question becomes the real core of this entire timeline. God Valley stops being a buried footnote and turns into the moment the world split in 2 different directions. In canon, Roger and Garp standing together meant that Rock's dream died there. That victory led to Roger's rise, the age of the Pirate King, and a romantic great pirate era where legends like Shanks and the Straw Hats chase freedom and answers. But what if that single clash flipped? In this world, Rox wins, Roger is broken instead of crowned, and the world government is the one left humiliated, scrambling to survive its own Marineford before Marineford ever happens. That one change meant that every structure taken for granted had become an absolute mess. There is no neat Yonko balance, no quiet Cold War between 4 emperors. Instead, the sea is dominated by one central monster, Rox D. Zabek, a force to be reckoned with who never faded into rumor. The world government fights from the back foot, its admirals acting more like desperate firefighters than enforcers. When a Marineford-scale war finally erupts, it is not Whitebeard marching to save Ace, but Rox himself dragging the world into a second God Valley. I'm determined to finish what he started. After that, everything about the next generation warps. Luffy, Ace, and Sabo do not grow up under the warm myth of a pirate king who found the One Piece and smiled before execution. They grow under the shadow of a captain who killed celestial dragons on their own sacred island and proved that terror can rewrite history. Freedom stops being a dream and becomes a dangerous rumor. Even training in hockey or awakening a devil fruit power feels less like adventure and more like preparation for an inevitable fight against the age of Zabek. Yet the themes at the heart of One Piece still push through. How would the inherited will of this world look when the symbol at the top is not Roger's grin, but Rox's sneer? God Valley shows how fragile everything really is. One victory defines which D the next generation remembers. But even with Rox ruling the seas, does humans still cling to family, justice, and freedom? Garp questioning orders, Dragon turning that chaos into revolution, Luffy stubbornly protecting friends in a world built on fear instead of dreams. These are the sparks that say the sea itself refuses to submit forever. So whose life twists the hardest in this timeline? Whitebeard, chained to a captain he might have betrayed? Garp, denied the title of hero? Ace, raised under the living shadow of Rox? Or Luffy, chasing freedom in an era that punishes it? Would living in Roger's age of dreams truly be safer than surviving Rock's age of raw power? And when that second Great War finally explodes, which ending feels most believable? Rock's crushed, Rock's ascendant, or someone even worse taking the throne? This is only one branch. Imagine a version where Whitebeard betrays Rox first at God Valley, turning that alliance into a civil war. Or a world where Dragon uses Rox as a stepping stone, hijacking his chaos to build the revolutionary army faster. Or even a quieter route, where a wounded Roger survives in hiding and eventually meets Luffy face to face in a world ruled by Zabek. But what if all of those collide in one final storm? For more deep dive alternate histories across the One Piece world, from Marineford rematches to rewritten Yonko eras, subscribing turns this single timeline into an entire sea of possibilities.